Hi, I'm Megan Young, and this is It's a Journey, where I'm going to highlight different stories, real life people, from grief to career. So these first few episodes are going to focus on the grief journey, hoping that you can gather some tips, some likability of where you don't feel alone, because grief is a tough journey and so unpredictable. So come along with me as we dive into journeys that will hopefully give you inspiration. Welcome, Amy. This is our version of life after loss and your version of your journey and everything that you can really tell us about that. So let's begin by just explaining, where that started and who you specifically lost.
So I've lost a lot of people in my life, but I think the one that had the biggest impact so far was losing my brother, who was, I was 18 when I lost him. He was 20. It was a month before he turned 21. He was my middle brother, and I have an older brother as well that is still with us. But I lost him in October of 2003.
Wow. So you were 18, he's almost 21.
Mm-hmm.
And at this time in your life, where were you in, your graduating job? What was that like? Just set the scene for your life. Yeah.
So kind of a backstory, my mom and my stepdad, who I had lived with pretty much my entire life, moved to a small East Texas city when I was a freshman in high school. And so they uprooted me out of what I thought was my perfect little life. And I moved to Tyler, Texas, and went to Robert E. Lee High School. Lasted about 4 months. Hated it, did not like it, was not happy, and decided that I wanted to come back to Austin. So I ran back as fast as I could. And my parents, in doing this, my mom and my stepdad said, you can go, but you can't take anything except the clothes that you have. So I packed up trash bags and came back to Austin because I didn't care what it took to come back, because I thought that was what was going to make me happy again.
Yeah.
So I ended back with my father in his house, and we'd never really been close my entire life. So it was new for both of us, and we butted heads, I'll say that. I was a pretty good kid, never really got into any trouble, always made really good grades, always had a lot of friends. But this was a weird time in my life. My life definitely was not the same. I was in this new environment, but the same environment at the same time, and it was just a very strange time in my life. So that environment was a big struggle for me. My brother saw this and helped me to get out of it. So I got a job, saved money. He helped me purchase my first car. And when I turned 17, I moved out of my dad's house on my own. And continued to go to high school. But during this time, I was learning how to be financially independent, struggling big time, living with roommates that were older than myself and in college. So anyways, there's a lot of details I could tell about that whole situation, but my brother and I got really, really close during this time. He was always a big protector of me, but in the situation that I was in, I ended up dropping out of high school and just working. Got offered a manager job at the tanning salon, making really good money. And so I decided that working and supporting myself was my priority at that time. And and then he died when I was 18. So.
Wow. So within this time frame, you are supporting yourself. I mean, you basically want to create a life for yourself because you didn't like the one you had. So you're like, you know what, I'm gonna hustle for that. And in that time, your brother helped you. Now, was he there to, do you think that his role for that time period, now that you look back, was really to help you settle into this and kind of form a new life that you wanted in Austin? Or?
Oh, definitely. If there was a time when I couldn't afford gas, or like I didn't know how I was going to pay for my next meal, or I was short on my rent, I always felt like I could depend on him and go to him for pretty much anything. He was also a protector, even in high school. I mean, Harris had so many friends, and anytime I was at a party, freshman, sophomore, junior year, I mean, everybody there was like calling him and being like, Amy's at this party. He would call me and be like, I'm coming to pick you up. Like, you shouldn't be there. Just a huge protector of me. Nobody messed with me. Guys were always even scared to approach me. And I really feel like that kept me out of trouble, honestly, because he was a huge influence on, stay away from my sister and making sure that I stayed out of trouble too. So,
yeah. Well, that big brother role,
yeah,
it's a hit or miss, to be honest. Like, you either have this really beautiful relationship that does develop a little bit of your life and, protector, which, I guess at that point in your life, you needed that.
Well, I appreciated it.
Yeah.
It definitely brought people into my life that I'm still friends with to this day. Some of my best friends were his friends. And so he connected me with people that are, gosh, I didn't think I was going to get emotional today, that are now my lifelong friends.
Wow.
So
that's really cool.
Yeah.
So he passes, and this was a big shock to you.
Oh yeah,
very
you never
sudden
think, oh my gosh, my brother who's only 20 years old is going to die. No, it was a huge shock. He was kind of mixed around with some questionable people and some bad crowds at the very end. And so, but even then, you never think
never.
that's going to happen.
So who told you? Do you remember details, or are you in a position where some of them, it's real fuzzy at that point?
No, I was at work that morning, and I was opening up my salon. It was early. I would probably say 7 a.m. I don't know, probably 7, 8 a.m. And the neighbor calls me. Both of my parents are deaf, so my dad wasn't able to he didn't have the ability to text message me at that time. So my neighbor calls me and said, something's happened. You need to get here immediately. Your dad came and got us. I called 911, so on and so forth. So I call my boss. I say, I'm locking up the store. I've got to go see what the situation is over at my dad's house. And my brother was actually at my dad's house when all this happened. And so I go, and I'm coming in this, driving down the street, and the ambulance is leaving. I remember seeing that. And I drive up and park, and there's all this yellow crime scene tape around the house, and my dad's coming out yelling, and just he's very emotional, obviously. And I just think, what has he done? Like, what trouble has he got into now? Who came, and did he get in a fight, or was there an argument? What's strange is that, looking back, I didn't think this is odd that this is happening in the morning time. I just thought, like, what is going on? I knew that he was kind of mixed in with some bad crowds at that time. And so I thought, what now? Like, gosh, went back to work. Didn't think anything of it.
Yeah. So no one told you, you didn't register how serious it was, nor did anyone know that it was,
No.
That's okay. So at that point, you go back to work, and then
the hospital calls, and they said, your family needs to get to the hospital immediately.
Wow.
So
now, it all happened in Austin. So I think that, a lot of people, things happen. It's not necessarily, in the place that you live, or and not only that, but you grew up here.
Right.
So, whenever all this happened, did you feel that you had immediate support system that kind of flushed over you, or were you one to back away from any kind of support system?
So I hadn't experienced trauma like this before. So definitely I had a really great group of friends.
Okay.
I think when you're 18-year-olds don't really know like how to support. I mean, my friends were there for me, don't get me wrong. And I think I did have a great support system, but I pushed people away because I didn't, and we'll talk more about the things that happened to me emotionally, but I didn't understand all of these emotions and the trauma. It was really traumatizing, and I didn't know how to handle it all. When my brother passed away, I put together a service. I secured the church that I grew up in. I called my youth pastor who I hadn't talked to in years, and I said, I need a place to have a service. He dropped everything he did and worked with me and my older brother, David, to put together a service within a matter of, days. My parents weren't really a part of it. They were, I think, trying to figure out things on their own. But it wasn't like I was upset about it. It was just something that all my life I've kind of just had to be an adult. And I knew that I had to take on this responsibility of, planning his service and, getting things done. And so you're in the mix of all this. I've got to get this done, and people are contacting you. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, what happened? And there's a lot going on during these first couple of weeks after, your loved one passes away. But it's not until all of that settles and you don't have people reaching out to you as much. You don't have the distraction of trying to put all the affairs in order. And that's when it really hits you. And that's when you really start dealing with the grief.
Okay. And so would you say, everyone wants to put, grief in some sort of box to understand, where you were at that point or how everything kind of transpired. But do you feel that it turned into, so you're busy, go, 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 which I do speak a lot about in my Life After Loss book, the aftermath of it all. Yeah. So now that is somewhat settled in having to go, do you then come to pieces? Are you kind of one of those that just likes to sit with their emotions and you're quiet? How do you usually take on grief? And it usually, it's really based on, if you've never experienced it, you really don't know how you're going to react. However, there is something in you that will just kind of transition into either shut down or let me jump into therapy right away, or let me try to figure out how to just cope with this.
So support system, back to that kind of, I don't really know how to answer that question. It's interesting. I think I had I had people I could call on if I needed somebody. But I was a little bit reclusive, trying to figure out my own emotions. It's an interesting thing because I think when you go through losing someone that's really close to you, you're kind of, it hits you really, really hard, but then you have to go to work and you have to deal with these other things. So it kind of floats away for a little bit, but it's always still that cloud over you, and then it hits you really, really hard, like at night. Or just for instance, I would see a picture, or I would call his voicemail just to hear his voice. I would see a car drive by and be like, wait, maybe that's him. And so I think there was all this little bit of hopefulness that this would all just go away. Like it wasn't really real. Yeah. But I definitely had some hysterical moments. But for the most part, I was pretty strong. If I think back to it, I kept going to work. It's not like I took weeks off of work or slept in my bed for, depressed. I kept going. I put on a smile on my face. I'm a pretty optimistic person. I'm very, very positive. I definitely had some heavy moments, But overall, I think that I dealt with it pretty well. I mean, but more quiet than hysterical. I definitely wanted to talk about it to people. I liked when people brought him up to me.
Okay. That was also going to be my next question for you, because I feel that you either want to talk about it, you may have some reservation at first, and there's always a period in time where you're like ready to talk about it. So now, you know, it's been so many years have passed. It feels like it was yesterday, I'm sure, to you. For someone who's new in their grief, is there some advice that you would give them, or even just some sort of meaningful lesson that you learned through this?
Sure. I always tell everybody that I know that has just recently lost somebody that it's a journey. It's going to get worse before it gets better. You know, like I said earlier, you're all caught up in people contacting you, and you're getting flowers and putting, you know, services together and getting all the affairs together. And after that goes away and things settle, I feel like is when the grief really starts, the process starts. And that can be a very dark place. I relied on my faith in God. I've always been a huge believer in Jesus Christ, and that I really think helped me get through it a lot easier. But there was also times when I was super angry and I didn't understand it. There was a lot of forgiveness that I had to work through the years, but immediately you just have to have grace with yourself and know that it will get better, and that time really does help you to move on. But it's okay to still have emotion about that person even years after they've passed away. Like, it's okay to, you know, revisit your feelings, and it never really ever goes away. You'll always have that spot in your heart that's empty from that person, you know, being gone. But I think finding something like my faith, my friends were a huge, huge help. I always made sure that I stayed social and put myself around people and talked about it and didn't run away from it. I always made sure I embraced it, because I think that everything happens for a reason. Even if we don't understand it now, years go by and we can look back, and although it's never a pleasant memory, there's a whole sequence of events that happens after that because of this event. And we're blessed to know that person in the first place, and everybody has to die. No one lives forever. And we have to be grateful for that part of our life where we had that person, and we have to just think positive. You can't think negative or blame yourself for anything. For example, I got a phone call from my brother that night at like 11:30,
okay,
and I missed it. I was asleep.
Wow.
And it's haunted me for so long. Like, was it him? You know, was it somebody there when it happened? Like, who was it? What was he going to say to me? Should I have answered that phone call? Would it have changed things? And I've had to let that go, because even thoughts of like, how long was he in pain? Was he aware of what was going on when it happened? Like, all of those things, it's so hard not to ask those questions. And when you're asleep at night and you wake up at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m., you know, thinking about it, those things can really haunt you, eat you up. And so it's really important to work through those things. We tried to go to therapy, my older brother and I, after this had happened, and we did a group therapy with him and I together, and it did nothing for me. It may have been the wrong therapist. It may have been that I was young and I was still trying to figure things out, and I didn't know how to utilize somebody else's help. I also didn't feel comfortable sharing some of the deep details about it. And so I didn't ever use therapy to help myself. maybe I should have tried more or harder. But at that time, it just was not helpful for me.
Yeah. Well, I feel like not only does it have to be the right fit, but also you have to be ready in your own time. So, and it may not be the traditional way of therapy either. And it could be that you find your own therapy in different ways. But I think that that's probably just by listening to you is what you did, is found, just the foundation that you already had in life from really growing as a person at a young age, and he helped facilitate that, which
Right.
is pretty cool. Mm-hmm. And to prepare you for these really hardships in life. And I think that looking back and finding the why of why they were here in our life is the most important question you should ask. Not, we can get, yes, if I would have done this, why did this happen? Why wasn't I there? And those are the things that can, basically hinder you from finding some sort of peace, because like you said, life doesn't stop. You keep going, and
yeah.
you have to, but I think that just hearing that and from the connection of your story is the really cool aspect, and something that you probably didn't even really think about until
right.
years later. But the grasp that you have on it and the message that you have is super important for those who are grieving. So I really appreciate you sharing it. I know that it's tough, and no matter if it was 20 years or yesterday, it's tough to kind of bring up the actual, event.
Right.
But you did it so well.
Well, thank you.
So thanks for having that courage to do it, and to really spread the message of grief. It can happen to anyone. We're not immune to it.
No.
So thank you, Amy
You're
Seeley, for being with
welcome.
us.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.